ritual is a process of integrating numinous unconscious content into our consciousness. Ano ba itong numinous? Something that is transcendence, something that is mystifying. And then we use rituals in order to get into this numinous and then bringing this to our consciousness. Now what we are doing now here, the numinous is of course in the unconscious. And there is something divine in that. That's why when we go deeper into ourselves, getting into the unconscious, especially the shadow, then we need to recognize the voice of God in that, okay? And so that's why we will be doing this ritual first. No, our ritual is similar to meditation, the transcendental meditation. And in Filipino, we call this kahingalay. Hinga means the breath, and alay means the offering. So what we need to do now is to tune in to ourselves, have a moment of silence, and then we begin to be conscious of our breathing. So we inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. You may want to close your eyes or relax and then feel the air coming to you. Feel the pressure from your head, from your shoulder, down to your toe. And then again, breathe, dip, exhale, being sensitive to our breathing, to the beat of the heart. And in silence, we go down deep into the unconscious. We are going back again to memories of the past. We are going down and look into the shadow. Now, what is the image of that shadow? The shadow is something you do not like, something you hate, something that is unwanted, something you despise. Go back to that memory. And maybe those memories brings you to some decisions in your life. Decisions that could have made a lot of consequences to you. Go back to that. It could be painful, or it could be something that has bring great moments in your life. Could be joyful, could be something that brings you success. Just bring it back to your memories. Now let's now continue. Would you agree with me if I say that our future, the fate of our future, would depend on decisions that we make, that each of us make? And the future is influenced not only by decisions, but also the actions taken because of this decision. And all of these were influenced by the needs and wants that we have. And these needs and wants are induced by rewards and it could have been repressed by unfavorable circumstances. Parang rewards and punishment ba? When you are rewarded, you keep on doing it. But if you are punished, you don't want to do it anymore. It's like pain or pleasure. If it is too painful, you don't want to do it. But if it is pleasurable, you seek for it. You always want to do it, right? And we learned this from infancy. So when we were born to this world, our need to procrastinate inside the mother's womb was thwarted. Ayaw ko mawala doon sa loob kasi that's your comfort zone inside the mother's womb. But nature says you have to move. You have to move on. That's why when we were born, nang pinanganak tayo, no? We cried. The infant cried out of frustrations. Frustrated na frustrated. Ayaw pa kasing lumabas. Dahil komportable na siya inside his mother's womb. But, of course, ayun, ipanganak na. Birthed, the infant managed such a stressful event. Very stressful na yun sa kanya, ha? Sa atin siguro baliwala, but for the infant, that is his first experience of stress. Now, when the infant grows up, of course, his awareness grows too, you know? So, his mind is developing. And so, likewise, he is also observing. And he is reacting depending on his experience of his environment. As his consciousness expands, and so his needs also expand. But then, there are only limited supplies. So the child thrives in this discomfort. Limited eh. Like for example, he always wants the mother to be there, but the mother has to work. So, from a simple-minded child, limited consciousness until our consciousness grows. As consciousness grows, as it develops, we cannot rush the mind to understand everything that is happening around. Even me, I could not fully understood what happened to me in the past until napaulit-ulit ito nangyayari. I was not so mindful of what was happening to me. But slowly discovering it, perhaps because of some trial and error, we cannot just rush our mind to fully understand it. But somehow, we learn from experience. The mind can fathom only what it can handle. And sometimes the mind's capacity to handle stress has limits too, you know. And sometimes when we are stressed, we couldn't understand what's happening. We have that threshold. Only for every individual, that threshold is unique. It's not the same. That's why yung iba, di ba, some people lost their mind because they couldn't stand that stress and they couldn't process what's happening to them. I think that's the key word, to process it. Because once you process it and then you start to understand it, your consciousness also expands. I think survival instinct is basic into this understanding our consciousness. Survival instinct is activated to defend what one could perceive as a threat to one's existence and well-being. Take, for example, what had happened to me in my 30s. I had a tenured job in the church, a dream job. But when I was bullied by my boss, I made a decision to resign. Especially because I felt she demoted my employment status by requiring me to clock in and out using the bandy clock. Pero issue ba yun? Kasi I was already in my supervisory position at the time, and the law says that you cannot just change that position. And when she wanted me to do the bandy clock, I felt insulted because only rank and files do the bandy clock, not the supervisor. So instead of filing a complaint, I decided to silently move away by resigning to keep the peace in the ministry. Maybe had I complained, I could have secured my employment, but at that moment, I felt emotionally harassed and depressed already. I don't like authority figures simply because I had a bad experience with authority figures starting from my childhood. I've already mentioned it that I was bullied by my teachers. They physically abused me. And so that's why sometimes when I look at leaders, I look at them with so much suspicion. I wala akong tiwala, and then I feel that they are threats to my well-being. Maybe that's why I had that feeling against her. And then I remember I have boss who now I am okay with them, but only after getting myself assured that I am safe with them, especially if they have qualities like being compassionate. Because remember, I mentioned about a tutor who was compassionate to me. So then, at first, I thought teachers are rude, are cruel, but then later on, I was able to see another side of a teacher who is compassionate, who is an enabler. And likewise, it also happens with superiors too. I also had a difficult experience with leaders before because I've seen how leaders manipulated us, especially in the church. And so that's why I have that preconceived notions in my understanding and deep down in my unconscious that was affecting my relationship with my superiors. And this happened to me with this person who was supposed to be my boss. So pagpatuloy natin yung story. I resigned and it created deep resentment not only towards that boss but also towards the church for the harassment that I suffered. In spite of the separation pay given me, the emotional pain has no monetary equivalent. It was my decision to resign, yet I continue to blame that person, that boss, and the church for such misfortunes that I suffered. Well, I survived, but my anger and frustrations were still there. These were expressions of defense to an ego that suffered. And every time I regretted the loss of the job, of the ministry that I love, I turned that blame to that boss. Yet I made the decision, a wrong decision I may say, because I should have stood up to my dignity, to defend my dignity and not allow her to harass and bully me. I should have made a formal labor complaint, but I chose to withdraw instead. My father was a lawyer, a labor lawyer, and he was good. And I didn't even tell him what happened because for sure, if I told him, he will intervene and file a case against that person. And I feel so pressured. Parang every day I go to the office, I have no peace. I would rather go out, go to the ministry because she was telling me, this job is your bread and butter. And I feel insulted because I don't look at it as a job. I look at it as a ministry. What was immediate in my mind, survival na eh. I just want to get rid of her. I don't want anything to do with her. I want to liberate myself from such a stressful condition. But then I resigned. I blamed my misfortunes to this boss and the sufferings I had working with her. But I never blamed myself for the decisions to resign. As if I was forced by the situation to resign, and for 2 decades I carried this baggage with me. Just saying this shows so much fired up in me, I'm so fired up. It's like the orphan archetype emerged whining within. At least now, I could see the shadow in me, recognizing the suffering that this shadow, this child had. Recognizing too that the anger I had with that person, an anger that seems cannot be diffused, that person is my shadow. What I hate in her, that rudeness, that inconsiderate, that perceived lack of compassion in her is also my qualities. I was exposed also to my shadow, my fault, my weakness. Oh, I see. I was like that too, and I hate it. But until I experience it, maybe I would not recognize how bad it was, how bad it is to be rude, to be having lack of compassion to your coworker, having being inconsiderate. And I've seen myself now with my coworkers. I become more considerate, but sometimes I medyo bossy, But the good thing is that we recognize this because this is how we befriend the shadow. Recognizing it, not suppressing it, but once you bring it to your mind, it will help you to make decisions, decisions of what to do. Like for example, I could decide, hindi na, not to suppress it, but to be a little bit more gentle, more pleasant, and more considerate in the way I speak to my subordinates. Well, we can no longer undo what happened in the past, but I can rise from the ashes. I experienced being burned at stake. But instead of whining, I should look at the shadow and accept it. If she was inconsiderate, look, and lacking of compassion, I must do better. I must do the opposite. And look with compassion towards my coworkers, just like what I said, be kind, be considerate. Likewise, understanding what had happened to me, I must recognize that the trickster in my life, that there is a trickster in our life. We cannot just command our fate. We must always be ready for untoward consequences of our decisions. Besides, if I didn't make that decision, I wouldn't be able to finish my master's. I won't be able to do what I'm doing right now, Moving forward, learning from the harassment in workplace, I learned how to speak up now for myself, stand up for my rights. One thing also that is important is once I see my shadow and I want to make a decision, I should have backup plans. Like before, I plan to resign, but then it's like, I want to resign, then I resign, but it seems that the inside was not ready for it. I could not let go. So that was the problem. And then I had no backup plans, and then what was in my mind is that the church will be supporting me. Then it turned out the support is not really there. And then so I have to look for ways in order for me to survive, And because it was too difficult for me, I started to blame the church, blame my boss. And the least to blame was myself. If I meet the shadow and I've seen that the shadow has warned me, I must be able to make backup plans. Dapat may plan A, there should be plan B, should be plan C. And then so that the self is ready for any untoward events. It's because life is a trickster, and then I have to recognize this trickster in us. We have no control of what is going on around us, but we have control on what we feel or what we think. We have control of our own decisions. Well, we can no longer undo what happened in the past, but I can rise from the ashes. I experienced being burned at stake. But instead of whining, I should look at the shadow and accept it. I remember myself saying to someone I hated most, "It's not that I cannot forgive and forget you. It is just difficult for me to forgive myself." Because at that moment, I felt embarrassed. I felt stupid that I allow myself being used and abused. And this is perhaps the reason why I blame people for my misfortunes. I blame that boss, for my misfortunes. It's just because if I hated her, it's just because I hated myself first, because I allowed it to happen. I did not stand up for myself, I was not able to speak up. In my depression, I could only see myself and my pains. And all I did later on was blaming myself. And in turn, when exhausted, blame those around me. And that's when defense mechanism turns maladjusted. Only when I recognized the shadow and had a conversation with the shadow that I could rise up again. Otherwise, the shadow possessed me as the shadow always do and express it on the way I act. And that's why sometimes I become so vengeful or threatening, and then sometimes I even send her was this poison messages. Galit na galit ako eh. Befriending the shadow is a contemplative work. And one has to go into solitude and contemplate, diving into the unconscious realm where the shadow is. I know I hate how bossy she was to me, but only then that it came to my consciousness how bossy I was too when I was a supervisor in another office. I hate her because she was my shadow. Admitting that I hate a shadow is the first step to recognize its existence in me. An affirmation that I hate that rude, inconsiderate boss in me, which I saw in her, is to befriend my shadow. I must start forgiving myself and heal. The fear to confront her led me to lose my job. The regrets in what I did led me to be cautious and have courage to speak up and fight for my rights. It happened maybe several years ago when I confronted my manager when she abruptly changed my shift, my schedule. We had intense verbal exchanges and top management has to intervene. After that incident, I remember how I was bullied and resigned without fighting back. But this time, I fought back. I had to prepare myself too, I should have some backup plans. Befriending the shadow doesn't mean repressing the anger or the emotions that was coming out resulting from the trauma. Somehow, we allow a certain projection of that shadow, but consciously. Because sometimes we could project the shadow but unconscious, and when that happens, it could be dangerous. It could be expressed by anger, and I'm trying to be careful that I will not be speaking something that will be incriminating me, And it's simply because I am aware, I am aware. I'm aware of the anger. I'm aware that this shadow is coming out of me because maybe people she might be saying I'm overreacting. Why should I be shouting? But it's because I was fired up by this previous experience. And then, but I was trying to at least be rational in dealing with that. That's why once I was able to express what I want, I was able to say my complaint, I stopped. And then I did not continue arguing with her because lalala lang eh. Diba? I just listened. Because what was important for me is that I speak up for myself. Befriending the shadow is acknowledging that I am angry and I should make use of that power, that anger, It has the power to seal up our quest for justice. In moral theology, this anger is one that do not make you sin. It's one that makes you holy. Like the prophets. Here the shadow is helping the mind in the defense of the self, in its defense mechanism, which is healthy and liberating. It's not maladaptive, using the pains of the trauma to work for justice. Our trauma could make or break us. Defense mechanisms are resorted to protect the ego, the conscious mind. But sometimes, it could be maladaptive if you are not aware, you are not conscious of what is coming out from you. If you just let that anger rage, Because I've seen some people, let their anger rage instead of focusing on their objective. The objective here is to correct a mistake. But sometimes, some people get too personal, minura na, nagsumbatan pa, which should not be the case, Just focus. That is what that manager did that to me. She demeans me, and then she devalues me, and then she belittles me. Why? We have to stay focused on the issue. And if the issue was only the time, then she went into even the way I work. She, issues like work behavior, this should be discussed in a separate venue, in a separate situation, not in a situation when I am stating my complaint. That's why when I did my complaint, I just focus on the issue. Yeah. Now, when the shadow tries to overtake and you do not know it, and then you could start demeaning the person or devaluing the person, yun na yung masama. Yun na yung excess. That's how the shadow possessed you. We can treat the shadow and bring us to wholeness. But there are people who was able to encounter the shadow, but instead of becoming whole, it become maladjusted. So, yun yung sinasabi ko na you become possessed by the shadow. It's simply because you were not able to integrate the shadow. You just let it possess you, let the emotions come out of you. And now this happens especially when people are so absorbed of themselves, maybe because of their pains. That's why part of the defense is to be more egocentric. Like for example, take for example, if one believes that the universe aligned to himself, the reality is what he experienced only, that he is the protagonist of life, siya yung bida, and the rest are supporting actors, or maybe kontrabida, villains. And if something goes against the script, it's not his fault, but those around him. Di ba ganyan din yung nangyari sa akin? That happens to me. After I resigned, and I think part of the defense is imploding. I become more egocentric kasi I was so much in pain, parang bang awang-awa na ako sa sarili ko. And then that was the time when I become more self-centered. That is one extreme. Another extreme is when one thinks that his future was predetermined and his self is irrelevant compared to the whole. Kawawa naman yung mga ganitong tao. That whatever happens, he must sway to the wind, get drifted with the flow of the waves, paano na lang siya, and fall as he drops. Sunod na lang sa agos. Now, the first one, the more egocentric, that's a narcissist, An example are the narcissist. And the second one, a nihilist. A nihilist is one who is so pessimistic of life. Now, what can help to come out from this kind of self-centeredness is being mindful of the self. And it could help achieve a more healthy and integrated sense of being. We have to look beyond what we are conscious and be conscious of what could be the motivations behind our actions, our decisions. What I'm saying is that we should be conscious, knowing that our instinct in survival mode prompt us to act. Knowing that various forces help us in survival mode, that beyond what we know is the unconscious. Now, taking responsibility is very important when we choose to survive, to meet our needs, and choices we make to defend when threatened. Accepting that one is not the center of the universe without falling into the trap of a fatalistic worldview. That each of us have our own command of our destiny. Just don't let it paagos, no, and not so much believe in oneself, So we have to be ready. We have to be ready for all the consequences. That's why it's very important that there are some backup plans. We have explored how our needs and wants have molded our minds from infancy to who we are at present. Our actions, behaviors, and decisions were influenced by factors within and beyond our control. We must face this with utmost responsibility. At iwasan na, win, playing blame game. Don't blame yourself, don't blame them. But instead, accept the shadow, let go, and make amends to do better. To bring to a conclusion our recollection, we shall bring our consciousness to the realm of the numinous in the unconscious. To Carl Jung, the numinous is a non-rational experience of the sacred, the soul's deepest and closest intimacy, not the holy other, as usually perceived by many religious, but the sacred grounded in the soul. We now use a ritual of watching, listening, and reflections, invoking the sacred to bless and empower us in our journey through our own unique individuation. As the self cringe through the night, darkness covers the soul. Inner desires burn until its soul burned into ashes. Yet those tiny embers lying within ignited the spirit and burst bright, then awakens the heart, steering the soul to life anew. May the Spirit stays and abide, brings us together anew. Come, Spirit of wonder, of youthful innocence and joy, console our restless mind and heart, in fear to find peace and bliss. Transform us altogether, rays of courage, our helper, who are your ends sage. Then awakens the heart, steering the soul to life anew. May the Spirit stays and abide, brings us together